It is time for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, so bringing you a first look at these sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney and the Athletics football correspondent Carl Anka. Welcome along to you both. We'll hear from you shortly, but let's just quickly run you through the back pages as we have them. A back page of the Mail looks like this: Twickenham quit threat. England are ready to leave their iconic home if the RFU can't host more concerts there at HQ. Also, they're on the side. Cody Day and bid to be king of the Olympics. Yes, they're looking to elect their new IOC president. Jordan Pickford pictured he was speaking as England prepare for their World Cup qualifiers. Onto the back page of The Guardian. So yes, crazy in rugby right at the top. There could be Beyonce spat lead to RFU leaving Twickenham. Going out, Women's League Cup could face axe in a revamp of the game, and Thomas Tuchel and Seb Coe also featured. Back page of the Mirror looks like this. Thomas Tuchel all wrapped up. Tuchel's energy has us all believing we can win the World Cup, says Morgan Rogers of Aston Villa. Dan Burn continues to generate column entries. There he is at the top. And the RFU may abandon Twickers for Milton Keynes, it says on the right-hand side there. On to the front page of the Telegraph Sports section. There is Emma Raducanu with a clenched fist, having beaten her opponent in the Miami Open first round. However, she's looking for a new coach. She split up with her last one after just a couple of weeks. That page of the Daily Express looks like this. Magic touch. Sort of works. Tuchel's aura has his players believing that they can win the World Cup, and similarly they're dealing with that Twickenham story, and the RFU may be considering leaving for another destination. Finally, back page of The Sun. Shock and aura. Rogers blown away by Tuchel's calm confidence. Right then. Welcome along, Miguel and Carl. Let's start off with the back page of The Mirror, which looks like this: win, aura, bust. Tuchel's energy has us all believing that we can win the World Cup, says Rogers. That's the headline. Morgan Rogers speaking as England prepare for World Cup qualifiers against Albania and Latvia. Miguel, hardly world beaters, are they, those two? But, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? He's really now settling in, getting his feet on the table, getting to know his squad in person, holding training sessions, and it feels like this is deeper than just a charm offensive from Thomas Tuchel. How do you read it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I suppose it is worth reflecting as well on what this week is, because it's obviously been a very long build-up. The news was confirmed, back in October. We're 5 months on now, and finally, Tuchel's actually got to work with the squad for the first time. So yesterday was the first media day. So, yeah, the last 2 days have basically been that first sense. And there's obviously a difference between having an image of a manager and a manager having an image of a squad, and then finally getting to work with them. So from everything you hear so far, I think this probably speaks to what Morgan Rogers was getting at as regards aura. There's been a real energy. Given this is a journalism show, it's probably worth also stating, the journalist perspective. Given I did cover Tuchel a lot when he was at Chelsea, including that Champions League win in 2021. I was there on Friday for his kind of first real press conference as manager after the initial announcements, and I'll be there tomorrow for his pre-game press conference. And I think, for those of us who kind of covered England regularly, most of us got on with Southgate. There was probably a sense it was just maybe he'd been there so long by the end, we got used to maybe a certain element of equivocation to his answers. Probably he got fed up with us as well. But one of the things with Tuchel, and I suppose this reflects about what we're saying in terms of an aura, he's a good laugh, to be fair. He's able to put journalists in their place. He has no problem, really going for jokes or barbs in a language that isn't in his first. And I think that does translate. And I think one of the, in terms of how the players have been working the last few days, the line is very much, yes, he encourages actually quite a warm atmosphere around the squad. But when it's time to work, it's time to work. And there's a real intensity.
Carl, when we talk about what makes the difference in terms of winning major tournaments, something that obviously England have failed to do since 1966 and something that Thomas Tuchel has been charged to do in this sort of 18-month period from now, how much do you think aura is a factor?
Aura, that undefinable thing, but you know it when you see it. It's interesting. I mean, Thomas Tuchel's well regarded as one of the best tactical minds working in club football when he was there. He seemed to be a coach that could outsmart Pep Guardiola in cup situations. And while he had 2 or 3 dints at his time at Bayern Munich and at Paris Saint-Germain, I very much believe he's an outstanding coach and very much will know the X's and O's to build on the very good work Gareth Southgate did. In terms of aura, we'll just have to see when we have to see. This is the thing we always talk about with England. There's just a constant mission creep. I think Gareth Southgate is one of the best England managers of my lifetime, if not the second best of all time. And yet every time he achieved an impressive win, it was retroactively fitted to, well, England should have done that anyway. So victories over Germany, victories over Senegal were regarded as not that special because Southgate did it. So I think it's challenging for Tuchel. He's got 24 in-game hours between now and the World Cup, I think, and very much is championship or bust. So while the aura is really nice and impressive now and he's telling jokes, let's see what happens when he's drawing 0-0 against Algeria, for example.
Oh my goodness. Memories of Cape Town in 2010. That was, Rooney down the camera and that was painful. You guys remember that? I wonder, it's because Morgan Rogers was the man who's been quoted in the back page Mirror and some of the other papers as well. I wonder, when you look at a player like him, how he might fit in to a Tuchel lineup, Miguel. He's obviously got all of these attacking options, and one of the hardest things that Southgate had to contend with was simply accommodating them. So where do you see Rodgers in a Tuchel 11, or not, as it may be?
Well, it's interesting. When Tuchel was at Chelsea, he was speaking to us about how, obviously, he used wing backs. He spoke about how he liked to play in a 3 or a 5-man backline. And the way he put it, the wing backs were essentially number 10s. Now, England's squad aren't quite built in that way. There is a lot of, there's a real concentration of talent in Rodgers' position. In fact, Tuchel was talking the other day about why he left certain players out. Not necessarily in Rodgers' position, but in those forward lines. And it does give him a lot. In some ways, it kind of maybe forces his hand, and surely you'd think any first 11 has to be geared towards that area. But also, it means he's got plenty of variety in terms of the number of options he can use. And yeah, you'd have to think he'll be quite creative in terms of how he uses Rodgers in that way. But one of the things there as well is Tuchel is very big on play. I mean, obviously he loves natural talents. Every manager does. But one of the things that frustrates him more than anything is players when he has that sense of not absolutely maximising their talents. And that absolutely isn't something you can say of Rodgers, who's been one of the revelations of the season, or really one of the revelations of the last year since he went to Aston Villa. So I'd say he's exactly the sort of player that Tuchel is really excited by, because he certainly has no issues with bringing in youth or younger players.
What do you think, Carl, will be Thomas Tuchel's sort of go-to formation, especially with this squad? Albania, 3, 4 at the back. I mean, he sort of did a bit of everything, didn't he, with Chelsea?
He does a bit of everything with every club he's been at. I think if you looked at England across Gareth Southgate's tenure, the 3 at the back was mostly used, or eventually predominantly became used in games where England were less likely to dominate possession. And in games against quote-unquote smaller opposition, it became a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, however you want to do. I think in these opening games, you are more likely to see a 4 at the back. There are things that England do need to solve or figure out from the Euros. The left side, there's huge questions over who's going to be a long-term left-back prospect, considering Luke Shaw's fitness and considering Phil Foden's quite underwhelming Euro competition. I think the right-hand side of the fence as well could do some tweaking as well, due to Kyle Walker not quite having the same recovery pace that he used to. So that sort of handbrake against the Kylian Mbappe stopper is not what it used to be there. And of course, I mean, to go back to Morgan Rogers, Morgan Rogers' best position in this England team is the position that Jude Bellingham plays, which is just behind Harry Kane. So Rogers might have to be a plan B. However, if you talk about plan Bs, there's also players like Morgan Gibbs-White who like to play a number 10. I'm sure Phil Foden might want to play it as a number 10 as well. So a surplus of options. I think your spine is going to be Pickford, a centre-back like, say, Guehi, Declan Rice. Who's going to play next to Declan Rice in midfield is going to be a big issue. And then sorting out those flanks when Harry Kane's up front, because Harry Kane will need runners, because, bless him, even when he didn't have the ankle injuries, he wasn't the quickest.
Let's talk about the first player mentioned in that spine, Carl. Miguel, the back page of the Mail, the picture is of Jordan Pickford setting his sights on joining England's 100 club. I mean, that in itself, such a huge milestone for any player to reach 100 caps. But also, I guess, for him to feel particularly upbeat now and particularly secure, given Everton's improving form as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose maybe for the first time in a little while, he goes to an England camp where it won't maybe feel a little bit of a kind of relief from some of the pressure that Everton have had, not just as regards position at the table, but also, of course, some of the uncertainty around the future of the club. Everything will feel much calmer. And Pickford's maybe been a bit of a kind of an interesting player in the modern era, or maybe a more distinctive career in the modern era, because he probably has been more defined by his international career rather than his club career. That's not to say he hasn't been good for Everton, but obviously all of the main moments or all of the kind of most memorable moments of his career have come in international tournaments. And I remember kind of something Peter Cech said to us a few years ago, which is he was talking about how with Pickford, when he looked at English goalkeepers, you could see that when he was in an international tournament, something just came over him. It was like he had the perfect mentality for a campaign like that. And that is one massive reason why, despite some criticism over the years, he's never been dislodged. And he's really, I suppose, one of Southgate's main legacies in that sense, given he did bring Pickford through, and that a year after Southgate's own debut back in 2016, or I'd say his own first game as manager.
Let's quickly switch to The Guardian and switch focus as well. Women's Champions League quarterfinals are underway this week. An all WSL tie, Carl, between Manchester City and Chelsea. How significant this victory for City, not just in terms of the status of the tie, but also given it's Sonia Bonpastor's first defeat?
Yes, defeat in, I want to say, 28 games. Just a tremendous unbeaten run broken, and not too long after the victory in the League Cup over Manchester City as well. So there was this idea that Chelsea would perhaps lose 10 to 15% after Emma Hayes would depart, but they just kept on plugging away, and they looked to be head and shoulders above everyone else in the WSL. But this victory, particularly with Viv Miedema coming off the bench and scoring a brace, really shows that there's intrigue in the Champions League tie here. Perhaps not in the other game that was played today between Wolfsburg and Barcelona, but it's not as straightforward as people might think.
No, I
there
mean,
are a
Chelsea...
few shades to this, actually.
Come on in, Miguel. I was going to bring him in anyway. What do you want to say?
Yeah. But just on that, there's a few shades of actually in the men's game in the Champions League when Chelsea beat Arsenal in 2004. And it's at the quarter-final stage, and Arsenal have been in a kind of, at that point, when they ended up with an invincible season in the league, seen as far and away the best team. Chelsea were, they ended up finishing second that season, but they were still considered kind of, some way off Arsenal's level after a recent takeover. And City, they're fourth in the table now, 12 points or so behind Chelsea. So to come out with a performance like that, it is striking. And it is something actually you occasionally see when two teams from the same country meet in the Champions League, that just the dynamic about it change. And they often seem like games almost conditioned by not fear, but wariness, because you're facing someone naturally so close to home. But evidently, City didn't feel fear tonight.
No, very much so. They did not let Chelsea get into their rhythm, and I think there was a additional physical element there that Chelsea were perhaps surprised by.
Yeah, well, we'll see how Sonia Bonpastor and the Chelsea players deal with this perhaps unfamiliar situation. 2-0 down, but can still turn the tie around in a home leg next week. All right, Carl, Miguel, thank you for the moment. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers, including this in the Times, as we switch our focus to rugby union. Sweeney, we may move to Milton Keynes. Yes, are the RFU really thinking of ditching Twickenham? We're back in a couple of minutes. watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to you at home. Welcome back to the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney and the Athletics football correspondent Carl Anker. Now, guys, we know that football is your specialism, but we're going to switch tack now as we head to the back page of the Times. And yes, it looks like this. Sweeney, we may move to Milton Keynes. No, he's not talking about his family home. He's talking about the RFUs and the home of rugby, Twickenham. Obviously, England have played there for well over a century. But it sounds like he's sort of firing a bit of a warning shot, Carl, to those who think that, you know, they're always going to be there. But it's all down to, surprise, surprise, money. Can you maybe just explain this story for us, first of all?
Yes. So Twickenham is only allowed to host 3 non-rugby events a year in its setting, and they are a reduced capacity of 55,000 compared to the usual, I want to say 82,000. Please correct me if I'm wrong there. Capacity there. The RFU are not pleased about that, or would like to renegotiate that deal so they can host more non-sporting events, more concerts, things like Beyonce, or if Taylor Swift or if any other large musician comes to tour in London, they'd like Twickenham to be an option rather than them going to, say, the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium or to Wembley Stadium, for example. And this is the RFU politely saying, if you don't give us what we want, we'll pack our things and go off to Milton Keynes, like a certain other sports brand once did once. In my personal opinion, this is a foolhardy threat from the RFU. They have a quite annoying tendency, and I'm speaking as a former amateur rugby player, they have an annoying tendency to forget the world that they currently exist in and then get caught up in short-term profits rather than long-term game. I think you lose a lot of mystique and importance to rugby, English rugby's history, by moving from Twickenham, and making such a threat is just quite unwise.
Is it, you know, just a little bit of a false threat, Miguel? I mean, you know, Twickenham, Twickers, HQ, however you call it, it's just synonymous with English rugby, with the England team, with Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, etc. And you know, the idea, with all due respect to Milton Keynes, of moving there, just feels like it doesn't sort of fit. And you know, obviously, as Carter's alluded to there, just simply this situation with Richmond Borough of not being able to put on any more concerts there, that, you know, pales into insignificance when you look at the likes of Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and Wembley in particular, you know, who have a pretty packed diary with these sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, both yourself and Carl have touched upon it there. Given the history of the stadium, given its, you know, its symbolism, its significance to English rugby, all that history wrapped up in it, everything associated with it, and also how much stock rugby as a sport places in its sense of history in a way, it's hard not to see this as anything but a game of chicken and a warning and a kind of an attempt at leverage. Can anyone really seeing them move? No, as Carl said, but maybe that is tempered by the reality we're in. I mean, I suppose there's 2 elements here. One is actually the evolution of stadiums in the modern era. And it's interesting how we've so quickly gone from a few years ago where people talking about how stadiums are sort of going to be the thing of the past as kind of digital takes over and your real fan base is wherever you are in the world, where it's actually gone the opposite direction, where stadiums have become one of the major money spinners in sport, or rather, crucially, owning your own stadium has become one of the major money spinners in sport, because you can kind of spin it out into all manner of events. And they're not just sporting arenas anymore, they're event arenas. And as Carl has mentioned, the massive example of this has been Tottenham Hotspur. Everyone wants their own Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Now, of course, the flip side of that, if they were actually to move to Milton Keynes, I mean, London is the premier event venue for a reason, given its, you know, its status as an Alpha Plus global city and all that sort of thing, where it attracts these sort of events. So there are pros and cons, maybe temper some of some English rugby's argument there. But again, that comes in the other context of this, which is English rugby generally, I mean, more so in the club game, it's going through a financial crisis right now. So they have to start looking at different solutions. So yeah, there's a lot into this. I mean, you know, gut-wise, you can't really see them moving, but maybe kind of the gut has to give way to some more logical thought processes here.
Yeah, and the pragmatism ultimately. And as you say, I mean, you know, rugby union is one of those sports that's always struggled to sort of market itself, even like with everyone chasing long-form episodic content. full contact has not been as successful as, the other one. Obviously, Drive to Survive, but also Full Swing and Breakpoint and the other ones we've seen across the other major sports. Speaking of tennis, by the way, Emma Raducanu managed to win over at the Miami Open. First round, done, straight sets. Pretty straightforward. But, of course, it's never straightforward when it comes to Emma Raducanu. This is the front page of the Telegraph Sports section. So, yeah, there she is, celebrating the win, clenched fist. However, she splits up with yet another coach. How much of a distraction does this risk being, Carl, in this still very talented and young athlete's career?
It's unfortunate. This is a trial period. After 11-day period, I think it's best to come to an agreement with your coach saying this is not working out early on and then move on to the next thing rather than not. Ms. Raducanu is a phenomenal tennis player. And unfortunately, the consistency in coaching hasn't quite been there yet, but I think she'll find a way to recalibrate and self-rate, and this will be just a blip 2 or 3 months from now.
Do you agree, Miguel? I mean, she's been struggling to kind of string the wins together, and it's been this scenario, particularly along with the injuries, we understand that has kind of been more of the constant narrative than her performance on court.
Yeah, we've mentioned this in the show before. I mean, it feels like Raducanu's career has a little bit. I mean, obviously not that kind of major win was the Grand Slam win was a bad thing to happen to her. It's obviously going to define her career. But it's almost felt like her career since is always going to be set against that. And she hasn't yet managed to match up to that sort of level. I mean, that's perhaps inevitable for someone at her age. But yeah, it has played into, I suppose, what has been a series of developments that have kind of just created this kind of fog of uncertainty around her career. And this is one of the latest. I mean, I was actually talking to a few people I know who do work on a tennis tour, and they actually said this decision today isn't surprising. What's actually surprising was the initial decision to take on this coach, because I know even though Raducanu's camp had tried to get him before, there was massive surprise at that because he wasn't really seen as maybe the sort of coach of the level that should be working of a player with her kind of status in the game. So yeah, maybe there's an element of kind of self-correction about this. It hasn't worked out. But while maybe this is actually kind of a decision they were going to come to, or that it was reasonable to come to, the very fact that it almost feels like a quick flip-flop, it just adds to that sense of just a constant uncertainty around her career at the moment.
OK, well, we've talked about the oval ball, we've talked about the small yellow ball. Let's bring you back to your homeland and talk about football. Back page of the Eye. They're billing this as an exclusive. Pete Hall and Mark
You can tell
Douglas.
it's International Week.
Reds in a hurry to seal £40 million Kirkes transfer. Always transfer news, though, Miguel. Carl, I'll come to you on this one first. So Liverpool closing in, it says here, on in-demand Bournemouth fullback Milos Kirkes. We've got roughly about 30 seconds each for this, guys. Good fit. What do you think, Carl?
Liverpool very much need to upgrade at left back among other positions. I think Robertson is a phenomenal servant, but he's often at the scene of the crime in some of their more egregious defensive errors. Kirkes had a phenomenal season. I'm not quite sure how he would fit in at left back, if only because they're probably going to have to look at who's going to fit in at left wing as well. So Kirkes sounds like a good idea. I do need a little bit more detail.
OK. Can you see him competing with, or maybe succeeding, Andy Robertson, providing the same kind of service, Miguel, as Robertson has done for Liverpool?
I mean, he's a slightly different left back to him. He has been one of the revelations this season. Liverpool aren't the only club looking at him. But then, of course, Robertson has been a left back that's been fitted into Jurgen Klopp's very specific style. Slot does have a different style. And just as maybe as this sense of maybe Robertson perhaps not being quite the player he was, it could just be a one-season lull. But if they did have to come to a decision where they're going to move him on or kind of phase a kind of another first-choice left-back in, it's maybe no harm to go in a slightly different direction. And Liverpool are in a strange situation where they're going to be champions. It feels like the team is generally in good shape. And yet someday almost possibly a sense that they need new players.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Miguel, Carl, thank you very much indeed. If you missed any of the show, another chance to see Back Pages tonight, hour. Also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Join us again Thursday night. Our guests are Jonathan Lee from The Guardian, Martin Ziegler from The Times.